What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Dungeon Master Experience. In this video, we're diving into the fantastic Dungeon Master Experience articles by Chris Perkins. He's one of the lead designers of Dungeons & Dragons. We'll explore his invaluable insights and advice to enhance your skills as a Dungeon Master and create unforgettable D&D experiences for your players. All right, what's up, y'all? We're back for the next article, and it's called Maptism. It's from August 4th of 2011. And this is actually the 25th article in the Dungeon Master Experience series. If you'd like to see all the videos I've done on these articles, there is a playlist in the description. But let's get right to it. My initial thoughts are that this article is going to be about drawing maps. Pretty obvious. So we'll see how it goes. And as always, I have not read these articles, so this is my genuine first read through. I'm planning on reading these articles anyway, so I figured why not record it? Anyway, let's go. Wednesday night, the adventurers are applying the elemental chaos when they happen upon a pirate base made from the hulls of 6 wrecked ships. The map for this location is something I'd created for another purpose, an upcoming organized play event called D&D Lair Assault Talon of Umberlee. But I love the way it turned out, and I decided to plunder it for my home campaign. A DM's gotta do what a DM's gotta do, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. If I could get a paying job as a D&D map maker, I would take that job in a heartbeat, even if the pay sucked. Don't get me wrong, I'm perfectly happy with my current line of work, but creating maps has always been a true passion of mine. Many hours have I spent drawing halls and statues and spiral staircases on graph paper over the years. Me too, Chris, and my teachers always took them away from me. That's the sad part. These days, my schedule rarely permits me to indulge in this artistic passion. Often I'm forced out of necessity to repurpose maps created for other uses. Either maps I've created myself or maps created by others. At right is the version of the map I created for Talon of Umberlee and plundered for my Wednesday night game, juxtaposed with a more professional rendering of the same map by freelance cartographer Mike Schley. So here they are. The first one is Chris Perkins' sketch of the map. And like he said, it's 6 ships that are kind of combined together into one floating platform. And here to the right is the much more artistic finished product. Damn, that's a cool map, if I do say so myself. Mike's version is lovely, but the location itself has a certain novelty. I spent a long time getting the shape of the holes just right. It's always risky to go off the grid, and I struggle a bit with curved walls. With this map, I cheated. I drew the ship's bow on a separate piece of graph paper, and then traced it over and over to create the versions that appear in my sketch version of the final map. Those of you who choose to participate in the D&D Lair Assault program, premiering in September and running concurrently with the in-store D&D Encounters program, might actually get to play the encounter for which this map was truly designed. If not, feel free to loot the map for your home campaign. It's what I do, and what every good Dungeon Master does. Well guys, unfortunately I don't think we're going to make it to the D&D Lair Assault game that happens this September 12 years ago, but I bet it was fun. Continuing on. When I was a kid, I spent a large chunk of my allowance on D&D and AD&D adventure modules. Tell me about it, knowing full well I'd never find the time to run all of them. Yeah, that is definitely the truth. Most of the products sold by TSR and WotC never actually get used at a table. That's the sad reality of it. A lot of them are just read kind of for fun, almost like a storybook, and they don't actually get used, or people also really like to collect them and have the full set. I know for sure I do. I like to collect the books and things like that. Even if I know I'm not really ever going to use, for example, like Dungeon of the Mad Mage or something like that, it is cool to have, and then you can pull parts of it out to use in your homebrew or whatever kind of use you can get out of it. The adventure maps are usually printed on the inside covers, and they were so incredibly evocative and immersive that I would often decide whether an adventure was worth running based solely on the maps. Would Count Strahd von Zarvik be half the vampire he is today, if not for Castle Ravenloft? If only you knew how famous Count Strahd was today. I bet he's at least 1,000 times more famous now than he was in 2011. I'm going to go with that. 3 orders of magnitude. I think it's hard to be a dungeon master and not be inspired by good maps. World maps, dungeon maps, castle maps, they define the world as much as any character, NPC, or plot. I don't think a love of maps is required to be a great DM, but it certainly hasn't hurt or hindered me. In fact, whenever I try to conjure up a new adventure, one of the first things I think about is the key adventure location and what the map might look like. In your campaign, it might be a haunted castle, a temple built by a pharaoh's monstrous thralls, or the killer dungeon of a mad arc wizard. In my campaign, it might be the winter palace of the Dragovar Emperor, a star-packed warlock's celestial observatory, or an elemental warship. Recently, I had an opportunity to catch up with Monty Cook, who I don't see often enough these days, much to my chagrin. Monty is a brilliant dungeon master who creates stories of remarkable depth and worlds of such intricacy that they feel absolutely real. Although what actually makes him brilliant is his willingness to let the players decide where to take the campaign and roll with it, which, incidentally, is the topic of next week's column. But I digress. Years ago, I was a regular player in Monty's famous Tullus campaign, which, like my current campaign, was run with 2 different groups on Monday and Wednesday evenings. I was in both groups, which allowed me to observe how Monty managed to create interesting stories and opportunities for one group's antics to influence the other. One thing that Monty and I have in common, beyond our passion and predilection for DMing, is a love of maps. He, like me, is a diehard map aficionado. One need only flip through the 672-page Tullus City by the Spire tome to see his passion for maps brought to vivid life. The book's cartography won an ENnie Award in 2007. And I clicked the link, and it's a dead link. When Monty worked at Wizards of the Coast, he used to bring graph paper to meetings and draw gloriously Gygaxian dungeon maps. I wonder how many of those offhand designs ended up in print. I did the same thing in high school English class. My only regret was that I didn't save any of those old maps, crappy as they doubtless were. Yep, same here. I did the same thing and always got my maps confiscated or my dice confiscated or sent to the office for reading a book at school, that kind of thing. My early designs were often nonsensical, and over the years I've learned that even dungeons need some internal logic in their design, that even the craziest archwizard or pharaoh builds towards a purpose, and every castle, regardless of size, needs at least one lavatory or privy. I don't have as much time to draw maps as I used to, so whenever I attend a gaming convention and have a few hours to kill, I glide through the exhibit hall and peruse RPG books for interesting maps. If I see something I like, I'll buy it in the hopes of plundering it for my home campaign. Masterwork Maps products are notorious for catching my eye. They produce great stuff, and their castle maps are particularly awesome. And the link works, and it goes to darkfuries.com, where they seem to have several products for sale here. Masterwork Maps, strongholds and sanctuaries, castles and keeps, temples and shrines, inns and taverns. Very cool. When I'm feeling lazy or pressed for time, I forgo the graph paper and instead turn to the internet for inspiration. For an upcoming adventure, I needed to create a map of a mansion, so I typed mansion blueprints into the Google search engine and discovered among the myriad images the following low-res image of a real-world residence called White Marsh Hall. And here is the White Marsh Hall low-res image that he's referring to. Realizing that I was missing the upstairs blueprint, I did a Google search on White Marsh Hall and discovered an excellent website chronicling the history of the mansion, with maps of the upstairs and downstairs levels, as well as exterior and interior images that could easily serve as player handouts. And the link to the website about the mansion's history is a dead link and does not work. Marveling at my good fortune, I copied the mansion blueprints, GIFs, to my desktop. Since these maps don't have a grid, I decided to add one. The grid makes it easier for me to replicate sections of the map on a wet erase battle map during the game. I downloaded some free digital graph paper, which is a wonderful DM resource, and even specified how big I wanted the grid and paper size to be. And the link still works to get some digital graph paper, and it's incompetech.com/graph paper. After converting the graph paper PDF into a JPEG, I superimposed the maps of the mansion onto the grid. I copied and pasted them onto the graph paper as separate layers and resized them using the Edit Transform function of Adobe Photoshop so that the walls of the grid aligned more closely. Here, then, is what the mansion ground floor looks like on digital graph paper. So here's what the mansion looks like on digital graph paper. In Photoshop, I can erase the tags I don't want and add whatever other embellishments I like. However, in this case, the maps don't require much manipulation. I'm pretty happy with them as they are. All right, so what Chris Perkins is talking about is going online, searching for a real-world map of something he's trying to replicate in the game. He found a mansion. He found a website about the mansion, got more images, got more overlays and pictures and blueprints and stuff like that. Then he took digital graph paper, pulled it all into Photoshop, and then he resized the floor plan, essentially so that the walls and stuff snap to the grid, but it doesn't snap to the grid. So he has to resize it and then kind of line it up and make sure that all the right angles and stuff match the squares on the graph paper as much as possible. That's what he's talking about here. So in the modern age of Roll20 and digital maps, a lot of these skills are much more commonplace, and you're going to find all kinds of maps online that already have the grids and stuff like that ready to go. Lessons learned. I've often joked that maps are D&D for Dungeon Masters. Forgive the weird analogy, but opening up the gatefold covers of old D&D adventures is like opening up, or centerfold, inviting drooling DMs to take their players into the poisonous dungeon beneath the hidden shrine of Timoachan, or the haunted house on the cliff and the sinister secret of Saltmarsh. Past issues of Dungeon are another great source of maps. The magazine has been around in one form or another since 1986. Those of you who have access to back issues are sitting on a veritable gold mine. And in fact, when there was Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine, every single time I would get the Dungeon Magazine rather than Dragon Magazine. Like if I was in the bookstore and had to pick between the two, always got the Dungeon Magazine because it really did have the cool adventures and the maps and stuff like that. Absolutely. We're even learning the lesson here at Wizards and trying our best to get new maps into Dungeon Masters' hands by every practical means because we know DMs don't have the time or ability to create their own. Some do, some don't. Most probably don't. Alas, too many modern adventure modules don't pay enough mind to creative map design. Consequently, they offer precious little to plunder for DMs who need good maps to fuel their campaigns. There are many notable exceptions. If you can't steal a map from Dungeon Magazine or some other source, you can always turn to the internet and use its power for good. Do a Google search on castle maps and see what you get. Now try dungeon maps. Next, wilderness maps. Finally, try searching for medieval city maps. Editor's note, don't pass up a chance to visit the Cartographers Guild. And then it puts a link to this Cartographers Guild website, which the link actually works. It's cartographersguild.com. And at the top it says Cartographers Guild, a forum for cartography enthusiasts. This looks like an old school forum from the golden age of the internet. When you go onto a website about the specific topic you're interested in, create an account, log onto the forum, and chat with other people. Of course, nowadays, a lot of this culture has been absorbed into Facebook and Reddit and stuff like that. But cool, I'm glad this exists. Cartographersguild.com, the link works. I think you'll be awakened to new adventure possibilities. Truth be told, you might never need to draw another map again. Although I hope that's untrue, since it's incumbent upon all dungeon masters to put pencil to graph paper and create new dungeons that might one day get published for the rest of us to steal at our leisure. Until the next encounter. So there you have it. That was Maptism. A pretty cool little article about how important maps are to Dungeons and Dragons. Nothing really earth-shattering there, but you can kind of see the origins of the proto-Neanderthal version of virtual tabletops, where Chris Perkins talks about taking the mansion map and overlaying it onto a grid digitally in order to create a map for his game. That kind of thing is done all the time these days for use on Roll20 and other websites like that. If you like the sound of my voice as much as I do, or like these articles or whatever, leave a like. The next article coming up is called DM's Lib. I don't know what that's about, but it makes me think of Mad Libs, so we'll see. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. See ya.